and let us all do we can to build a better future.
It's come to my attention that Briahna Joy Gray was recently on TYT. The conversation with Cenk Uygur. They talk a little bit about Force the Vote. I'll be watching that and taking notes of that interview, and I'll give my own analysis at a later time. But it's also interesting to point out that Briahna Joy Gray was also on the Vanguard, talking about Bernie Sanders. Now, I want to be very clear with this. I will respect Bernie Sanders for inspiring myself and Daniel to actually get started with the show here, Hard Lens Media. Let's face it, at one point in time, Bernie has inspired a lot of us to do better, to be better. And unfortunately, it seems now that Bernie is just fully on board with the Democratic Party. And I think we have to be very real with ourselves and look at the simple fact is that no one from Washington, D.C., even if it's a politician we respect, is going to help us out. So I want to pull up this video clip here where Briahna Joy Gray is talking about Bernie Sanders and the movement that he abandoned. Let's play it.
Anymore. If there was even a 0.000 chance in his mind that he ever wanted to run for president again, he should not have, abandoned the movement the way that so many of us felt like it was abandoned from the beginning. There has been very little engagement with left media. There was the one interview with Crystal Ball that, even Kyle wasn't able to participate in. There has been little to no, I'm going to lean toward no acknowledgement of the frustrations or criticisms that have come out of the left since he dropped out of the race very early and with what seemed to be very little in the way of extracting concessions from Joe Biden. There has been an unwillingness, and I'm not an insider. I don't know what the decision making is, and there might be very good reasons for these things. But as an outsider, there has been no explanation for, and therefore I have a frustration with the failure to be a Joe Manchin or Kyrsten Sinema style senator and use the fact that they needed his vote to extract concessions for the left the way that they've been doing for the right. There has been an unwillingness to continue. Well, I shouldn't say continue, because this is one of the criticisms during the primary, that Bernie Sanders wasn't sharp enough in his criticisms of Joe Biden, his critique of Joe Biden. So that pattern has continued, and even, I would argue, softened outside of the context of a literal primary race, where you don't feel the kind of rhetorical tensions and the kind of political tensions that are required to make your base feel like it's still a cohesive unit. Moreover, I do think the lack of engagement with the press is the left media is a bigger bigger issue than people understand.
Okay. So there's a lot to unpack there with that commentary from Briahna Joy Gray. Look, Bernie Sanders has yet to show his face on independent media, even on TYT of all places. Now, he has to be fair. He's been at, I think, a town hall that they hosted at one point talking about Medicare for all. But for the most part, where's Bernie? Where's all the heavy hitters in the progressive movement? Where are they at? They don't show up on independent media anymore. It wasn't too long ago where people like Nina Turner, AOC, Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar were more than happy to be on independent media at some point in time. Maybe just to use it so that they get more attention to them. But since then, they're all in line with the Democratic Party. They're going to corporate media, and that's where they're getting most of their attention from. That's where they're going to. And with Bernie, let's face it, not once but twice, in 2016 and in 2020, in both the Democratic primaries, election fraud took place, where the DNC was shutting down polling stations, election machines were rigged, lack of paper ballots, people being kicked off the register of being a Democrat, people waiting 8 hours in line, 10 hours in line just to vote. Hell, all the way up to the next day. And was there any kind of outrage from Bernie Sanders in regards to how his volunteers and supporters and delegates were being smeared and attacked, not only on corporate media, but also on social media too. This whole notion of Bernie bros and all the people part of Bernie Sanders' campaign were nothing but straight white males, even though Bernie Sanders did have a very diverse campaign. A lot of women holding leadership positions in Bernie Sanders' campaign, but yet at the end of the day, Bernie Sanders let the DNC get away with it. He didn't raise a single finger or even say anything to call out the Democratic Party for what they did to his campaign. And especially in 2020, when Bernie decided to drop out of the race and not even fight back or even criticize his good friend Joe. Remember, that's what he said. Bernie said about Joe Biden, my good friend. We have to come down to the truth of it. While Bernie might have inspired some people in independent media, inspired some activists and organizers, and so much more, he is not the leader that we need. We need someone who's going to be unapologetic. We need someone who's going to fight back. We need someone who will actually stand up to the smears from corporate media and punch them back. Stand up to the two-party system. This is why I say we need to have movements and organizations that are not connected to Washington, D.C., and we cannot start hero worshiping these politicians. But sadly, there's a lot of Americans, diehard Democratic voters and diehard Republican voters, that still think that the politician that represents them in the United States Senate or in the United States House somehow cares about them. This includes Bernie. If Bernie really gave a damn, he would have fought harder. If Bernie actually gave a damn, he would have formed a third party. If Bernie actually believed in all his talk about setting up a movement, starting a revolution, he would have and should have fought harder, but he didn't. So let's have democracy in the chat. Let's have democracy in the chat. And it's only fair to ask the audience this. Has Bernie Sanders effectively abandoned the movement? Type 1 if you still have absolute confidence in Bernie. That yes, he will stand with us. He hasn't gone anywhere. Type 2 if you think he's abandoned the movement. With that being said, for a final note for this story. Doing this kind of thing with independent media and calling out politicians, there's always going to be pushback. But all politicians deserve to be criticized. All of them should be called out. They're public servants. They work for us. And I think it's only fair to call out Bernie Sanders. Yes, he's inspired people. Yes, he said things that we can all agree with. These are his policies. Yes, I agree with these policies. I agree with his message. But at the end of the day, he didn't stand up against election fraud. He let it happen.